It was sore. I mean, it was quite uncomfortable, but it got more uncomfortable and became excruciating. And I used to bite down on things or stamp my feet whenever he was latched. I would cry and be in utter pain.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 196. I am very excited to introduce to you today my guest, Zainab, who lives in London. She is the mother of 2 children, and while she enjoys motherhood, and she comes from a family where her mom breastfed all of her 7 children, Zainab admits to going through periods where breastfeeding was not only painful for her, but she admits to actually hating breastfeeding. Yes, I said hating breastfeeding. She was angry and resentful with her baby at her breast. Now, why on earth would I want to have someone on the show who admits to hating breastfeeding? Better still, one wonders, why would she even want to spend time with me, waste time with me if her message is about hating breastfeeding? I think you're going to have an open mind for this. Some moms do not have the best breastfeeding experience, and she is here to talk about her overall experience and really speak to moms who are having some challenges with breastfeeding. Stay tuned and you will find out more about Zainab and what her message is. Before we get to the interview, I would love to remind our active listeners and to let new listeners in on our Facebook group. This is a nice, comfortable group where you can talk about breastfeeding, talk about how it's going for you, share pictures of your babies, and everyone knows I love the pictures, and a place where you could also seek advice for some of your breastfeeding issues. Our lovely group members will chime in with their responses to your questions, frequently, some sooner than I do. My role in this group is to help, support, and advocate for you, as well as to ensure that the information you receive from the outside world and from members of this group is accurate. Members know at this point that they can count on me jumping in when something that was shared is inaccurate or is just not the response that you need. I also make sure to praise the members of this group who take time out of their busy lives to jump in and share with you what they know and answer concerns of yours. I love when I see this kind of activity in the group, moms helping moms. You'll also see me in there this week because I'm going to be doing a Facebook Live series this week. When this show is over, just head over to the search bar on Facebook and punch in the 4 words, All About Breastfeeding Community, and join our group. For right now, enjoy today's show. Welcome, everybody. Today I am here with Zainab Yate. She is a vice chair of a North London Research Ethics Committee and a breastfeeding peer supporter with the National Health Service in the UK. After experiencing breastfeeding aversion and struggling to find any studies or information about it, she began to research it herself and now supports mothers who experience aversion online at her site, www.breastfeedingaversion.com, and that is spelled AVERSION.com. And I would love to welcome Zainab to our show. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing okay. Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, so tell us where you're living and what time it is by you.
I'm in North London, in a place called Watford, just outside London, and it's like 9:30. Thankfully, the kids go to sleep enough time for me to have a bit of a cup of tea and a break.
Wonderful. And I know how precious your time is when your kids go to bed, so I really want to thank you for spending time with us here today.
Oh no, I'm really looking forward to it.
Tell us just a little bit of background about where you grew up and the family that you grew up in.
Well, I was born in Iran, and we traveled a lot straight after, really, because my father's English and my mother married him when they were both in the university, and we settled in England when I was about 6. So, I mean, we do go back to Iran, but I really do feel like I'm kind of here and English. And my mum had 7 children and breastfed them all. It was very busy growing up. You know, it was always kind of rushing around the younger children and trying to get everything done. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Where are you in the line of 7 kids?
The eldest daughter.
You're the eldest daughter.
So I'm actually the second mum.
Yeah. I was just going to say.
It's the kind of mothering. Yeah, that's probably why it was quite busy for me.
Yeah, you were doing the kids thing and the second mom thing and helping out a lot.
Definitely.
Since you're the second oldest daughter, I don't know how far apart the kids are. Do you have memories of your mom breastfeeding?
Yeah. My 2 youngest brother and sister, they were big gap between the first 5 and then 2. My mom would be nursing them, and I remember them now. It's very odd to know them as adults going to university, because I remember them also as toddlers and babies, and it makes me feel really old. I do remember it, and it was nothing that was really out of the ordinary for us. It never came across our periphery to think otherwise, even though I think in England at the time it was quite a bottle feeding, form feeding culture, even from medical practices to tell women to supplement or to exclusively formula feed. But I think because my mother was from Iran, it just was a thing where you breastfed, and that's how it worked, I guess. And I never really thought about it either way. It was more just about getting on with it, feeding them, running around, trying to get to school, trying to get back, and just going through the motions, yeah.
So if I'm hearing you, breastfeeding was just part of the rhythm of everyday life.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not sure, but I didn't see her struggle with it. So, and I do tend to ask her now about how it went, and she tends to not really remember, and she just said she kind of like fed us and just got on with it, and or kind of moved us to sleep and just put us on the mattress next to her and just kind of got on with sleep. Things like that. But sleeping seemed to be, or bed sharing either seemed to be a kind of norm for her, and I can't recall her having many difficulties actually. So I think I was a bit surprised when I had a lot. Because,
right.
I never ever expected any difficulties, because I was never really exposed to any, really. Well, not from my mother's side, and just in England you don't really have much antenatal work done to help you be aware of breastfeeding. So it didn't come across me or my mind at all when I was pregnant. Not even once. Except for perhaps the thought that, yeah, of course I'm going to breastfeed, and that was it, really. So.
Right, that's what's so interesting about your experience, because you came from a family of a mom who breastfed 7. It was a part of everyday life, and you as when probably thinking about becoming a mom, really didn't go to classes, you didn't, gather a lot of information, and you just assumed that you'd be a breastfeeding mom, and that would be a part of your new motherhood, right?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think it even occurred to my husband or I that there would be any difficulties at all. Like, not even any at all.
Not once. Right, knowing that you did have difficulties, that is, I think that's what makes it, that's much more maybe exacerbating for you, in that it was totally came out of the blue and unexpected, and the difficulties, we're going to get into it, the difficulties that you went through were also not common ones. So it was probably difficult for you to get help? In other words, when you have difficulty with position and latch and sore nipples, if there are professionals around, you do have access and you can, and an expert can say, oh, I know what the problem is. Here, let me help you with it. And then you get help and you get on with it. But in your experience, I imagine it wasn't like that. So I would like for you to tell us a little bit about like the very early days with your first baby and what that was like, and at what point you realized that things were difficult, that you were going to have to pay attention to this whole breastfeeding thing.
I think it's difficult because it was exacerbated by the fact that I didn't labour naturally. So, I mean, I did for a long time, and then I was under a lot of pressure to have a cesarean. And in the end, we took the advice of the doctors. Actually, I think I actually just told my husband to make a decision because I was so upset with them, and he thought it in our general best interest to go with them because we didn't have much of another choice. So it was very difficult in the beginning, but I do remember with regards to breastfeeding, he latched straight away because they helped us do skin to skin. So, I mean, within about 20, 25 minutes, because they gave him to my husband first. And it was probably a blur for a few weeks. I just tried to get out of the hospital as soon as I could because they wouldn't allow partners to stay and help. And I couldn't pick him up. I was hungry because of my C-section scar. So I instantly became aware of it being quite difficult to sit him without help. And the midwives were very busy, like probably in America or a lot of countries on postnatal wards, they're really overburdened. It was sore. I mean, it was quite uncomfortable, but it got more uncomfortable and became excruciating. And I used to bite down on things or stamp my feet whenever he was latched. I would cry and be in utter pain. Yeah, at the time we were lucky to be in Harrow, so we didn't know about any for a couple of sessions. So I did get some positioning and attachment, and in a way it took away from the excruciating pain, but it was never really comfortable. And later on we found out he had tongue tie, which probably affected his feeding, and he had visible restricted movement of his tongue. So that probably was a factor, but at the time I didn't really know anything about that at all. And it was really tough, and I think the turning point was about around 6 weeks when I realised it's just going to stay tough, actually. It's not going to get easier. Yeah, it was a really difficult beginning.
So a couple of questions. So you said that, the birth didn't turn out the way that you had expected. You had a cesarean. Were you planning on a vaginal birth in a hospital with a midwife?
Yeah. And there was all the kind of failure to progress and that kind of language. And I did actually go into labour and I was dilated. Some midwives said 7, some said 6. But I was in active labour for sure. But unfortunately, what happened was in my complete ignorance and naivety, I woke with a little pool of water in the morning. It was very small. It was about that much. And I thought my waters had broken. And I called in a bit of a panic. And they took it as truth. And so they started the clock ticking.
Right.
The 24-hour clock ticking without taking any kind of test. My waters hadn't broken because I knew damn well when they did. I knew. I was like 6 or 7 centimeters. I was labouring contractions 2 minutes, 1 minute apart, and my waters broke. And that was, so it was just a series of unfortunate events and erring on the side of caution.
Yeah, and then when you have a cesarean section, you're recovering from that. And from what you're telling me is your baby was diagnosed with tongue tie, so that is usually one of the very common reasons for having that kind of pain with latch, that you said you're clenching your jaws and, in to people around you in visible pain. And it can make for pretty rough time breastfeeding in that I experienced it not with a baby with tongue tie, but just with painful latch, that your baby is waking up, they're looking to feed, you know you need to feed them, and you start crying along with them while they're crying because you're not looking forward to putting them to the breast, because every time you do that, you're causing yourself intense pain.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. It was nothing short of horrific at the time. It was really horrific.
Yeah. Now, was your mom with you at all?
Yeah, we actually went to stay with my mum after, because it's the kind of thing. I mean, I don't know. Iranians do it as well. I mean, either your mum comes to stay with you or you stay with your mum in the beginning. But with regards to the breastfeeding, this wasn't very helpful, fortunately, and my husband was completely taken aback. So between my mum and my husband, they just didn't know what to do. Yeah, it was only when we got to a breastfeeding group that my positioning was wrong. It was making it worse, for sure. But it was with peer supporters in that group, so they missed the tongue tie.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of weeks later, I'd gone back to say, look, I mean, he was undiagnosed, and my daughter, now later, she was diagnosed and snipped. So within a couple of weeks, because it wasn't as painful, because I had a lot of support, but there was still clicking, and there was still lipstick shapes of the nipple coming out and stuff like that. And but it's funny because she nurses now and still comes out lipstick shaped. So it's still sore now. So I don't know. I've been meaning to try and get someone to come and have another look, but sometimes you wonder, because she's now, nearly 20 months. It's a big thing. It's a thing that really, really is hard, breastfeeding.
Yes. So that, I'm sure all of the pain that you felt with your son, and then although it wasn't as bad with your daughter, but I'm sure just getting off to a rough start probably played into what you experienced next. And so I'd like for you to talk to us about what you experienced next that also, more than likely, I'm just going to take a guess, really took you by surprise and probably took a while to figure out even what you were going through, because there's not really anything written about it.
So basically, I got hit with aversion. It wasn't to me. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know it was a thing, so to speak. I thought I was probably the only person that had it at the time, because it was very horrible. So around 4 months, just before 4 months, and my son started waking every 45 minutes at night and wouldn't settle without the breast. And I just started to get such an intense anger when he was latched, and it was quite apart from the discomfort of breastfeeding, because I'd had that for months prior, and I'd never had this kind of feelings of anger and rage, and it was really, really shocking actually, because it was breastfeeding. I didn't understand why it was happening when I was breastfeeding and why it wasn't there otherwise. It was really, honestly, it was one of the most difficult things I had to go through. I mean, when it first hit, I didn't tell anyone, because why would you think you're going a bit mad? And then it just didn't go away. Actually, it didn't go away at all. I think the severity may have changed over the course of the next year and a half as I fed him, but every time he was latched, I get feelings of anger, intense irritation, agitation, an urge to get him off. As soon as he was latched, I mean, it would just be within seconds. So my letdown hadn't even come down, and it just wouldn't go away. Sometimes if he was teething or upset or ill, I'd have to nurse for quite a long time, and it was really hard. It was just there all the time, and
What I want to do is like a little more detail around it, because this is, again, we both know that in our field, or there's a lot spoken about the beauty and the bonding and the love that mom feels when she's breastfeeding her baby. And we both know that certainly that happens. To some women, it doesn't happen until several weeks or several months, but they're not having an aversion. They're not having pain. It's just that they're not getting too much joy out of it either. It's just something that they're doing. A lot of moms, it happens just from the very beginning, that outpouring and feeling of love for their baby, and it only intensifies and they relax when they're breastfeeding. So you had, quite a lot of pain, and you started off with a really rough go of it. So what I want to understand is that, like, now you're nursing your baby, and it's painful, it's not comfortable, but you're sitting there breastfeeding your baby, not necessarily having these feelings stirring up of anger and of rage. You're just kind of doing it. Would you say that? So what was that switch like? Because I want moms to understand, because there are some moms who they may be experiencing it. What I want to hear is like what that was like for you, because you said it was around 4 months. So before 4 months, you were just a mom breastfeeding her baby and it wasn't totally comfortable for you. But when you sat and fed him, you can just sit and feed him and just be there, be present. And you might be able to think of other things and have a list in your head of a laundry list of things to do. And to me, it's sounding like you reached a point where there was like a switch over where you were having these intense feelings of, you used the word anger and rage. And what I'm asking is that, like, it wasn't gradually building up like you were having those feelings and then it just got worse. So it literally was like a switch turn.
No. Yeah, and I know that because I experienced it with my daughter. And actually, when I fell pregnant, I was petrified, not of labor, not of anything, I was petrified of aversion. Thinking, really, I was so worried about that. And I didn't have it until 15 months. Well, I had a short burst at 9 months. And I think that's because my postpartum menstruation returned. And I kind of linked it to that. And then it kind of dissipated a bit. And then again, it hit really strong.
Yeah, with your son, when it hit you, I know, that you didn't really want to tell anybody at first because you're thinking you may not even be sure and you're going to think other people are thinking that you're crazy. At what point could you either not hide it anymore, or did you start talking about it, telling your husband or a care provider or someone else?
Yeah, I couldn't find anything. It was only just before I had to wean him that I found the historic milk ejection reset online. I found, and on her site, I found some reference to breastfeeding aversion and agitation. Breastfeeding aversion, and then I found an article about Hilary Lauer's book. So it was about more than a year later. I didn't even really tell my husband because I didn't really know what to say.
How do you feel like that affected you as a new mother with a baby?
Yeah, it really ruined everything, to be honest. It just ruined everything. It didn't help that he didn't sleep very much or sleep very long. And sometimes I wonder if that's because of my state and my feelings when I was breastfeeding, whether it made a difference, whether there was more I look back at it now and knowing what I do now, I think, did I have more cortisol, the stress hormone running through my blood, than oxytocin, the love hormone, or was the balance of oxytocin not really there, the relaxant part of it? I don't know, but it made everything really difficult. Yeah, and it was very, very attached to the breast. So it made things kind of intensify with me. He just kind of wanted it all the time. And I mean, it was just literally incessant. So there would be periods where it was incessant. I would be on the sofa even when he was 12 months, 14 months, 15 months, and I wouldn't be able to get up. So it was really, really difficult. Yeah, really awful. I'm honest, yeah.
And I appreciate your honesty, because in the field that we work in, a lot of people are just going to recoil at the mention of saying it was horrific, it was awful, I didn't like it, because we know that a lot of people only want to hear about the good things about breastfeeding. And there are some difficult parts that I think that we do need to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's one of the primary reasons I've done all of my campaigning. That's actually the only reason that set me off and the only reason that keeps me going, because if I can get the message out there to one mum that's not expecting it, that she even knows mildly about it, there's a difference made. Because if I was forewarned in any way, just to do with the space, pick breastfeeding. I feel like I would have been a little bit forearmed, or I would have known maybe some tips or tricks. I wouldn't have been so taken aback. Perhaps I would have talked to someone. Perhaps I would have found out about some of the things that can help that I know now back then. And yeah, it's a shame that you have to think that to promote breastfeeding, you have to promote it as something that's magical and brilliant, which of course it is, but just like everyday life, there's not so brilliant parts about it. And, most women in the choice and support will take the trade-off of having to put in and give and feed and offer and milk their nurslings because the trade-off is the benefit. And, we don't give women that credit. We need to give them that credit. We need to tell them the truth. Even if you don't have this breastfeeding, it's your breast.
So I wonder, I know that this was just normal life in the family that you grew up in and that you knew the benefits, but considering the fact that it was just so incredibly awful, I am curious why you didn't stop breastfeeding much earlier. Like, what made you keep going with all of those angry feelings and difficulties that you had? What made you keep going?
I did, in desperation, try to offer him a bottle, and he wouldn't accept it. So he was very attached to the breast. So at the time, didn't really have a choice in that respect. But I always looked at it, and I'm grateful for him doing that because my goal was to exclusively breastfeed. And that goal might be linked to how I was brought up, which is as a Muslim in their kind of traditions. It's actually in law, the right of a human child to have human milk. So I just always knew for 2 years, and I think back of my mind, but at the time it's not like I thought about it. It was just like the rest of the things about breastfeeding. I just knew I would do it. So I did try and give him a bottle, but I think because I failed at labour, I felt that my motherhood was tied to my breastfeeding as well. So if I didn't labour and then I didn't breastfeed, then what exactly was I doing? I think that's probably, looking back at it, how I felt. I just, breastfeeding was the thing I could do. It's probably the only thing I could do for him. So,
and I hear that a lot as a lactation consultant. I hear that when moms come to see me, if they haven't had a birth that they desired, or they had birth trauma, and they're having problems with breastfeeding, that's like just an increased personal pressure they put on themselves because they feel like they didn't have the birth that they wanted. And now on top of that, the next most natural thing, breastfeeding, is not going well. So it's, personal pressure.
Taking a little break from the show. If you are curious about the work that I do and the services that I provide, just go to allaboutmothering.com and check out that page. Scroll around, look at the top, the navigation bar. You'll see information on free resources. You'll see information about groups that I'm forming. Registration is now open for the 3 groups that I'm currently facilitating. The first one is for moms just like you. You are pregnant and due soon, or you're with a new baby or in the early days of breastfeeding, and maybe it's hard for you to get out and hang out with other moms. I really want you to join this group. It's an online group, and we meet regularly once a week. I've learned from my own experience and talking to mothers over many years that so many moms feel alone, especially in the early days of breastfeeding. And being a member of this group ensures that you're not alone. You have a place to talk about new mommy life and breastfeeding and make some friends. We meet virtually, and there are only 10 spots in the group. So check out the page, www.allaboutmothering.com, and don't procrastinate in registering. The second group is for those of you who are studying to become an IBCLC. You don't need to be alone in your studies. There's a whole world out there of other students who are dedicated to helping you and looking forward to you helping them. And you're all going through similar challenges. There is beauty and strength in numbers, so join us and have a few dedicated study buddies to share your educational journey with. And the third group? This is for IBCLCs, my peers, who either have a private practice and are looking to boost it, or for IBCLCs who are thinking about opening their own private practice. Getting support, advice, pearls of wisdom, practical information from others who are involved with a private practice will prove to be extremely valuable. Like I said, just go to www.allaboutmothering.com. There's lots more details about the group and how you can register. You'll see resources on that page too. All right, for now, let's get back to the show.
So tell me, was there a period between your first baby and your second that you now learned about it? And is there a point where you are starting to do some research about it, breastfeeding aversion?
Yeah. I found a couple of, they were just mainly books online, and I tried to take them to my doctor to say, is there anything that you can tell me about why this was for me? And essentially they couldn't really accept it because there wasn't anything published. And my research ground, I mean, I've been in research ethics for nearly a decade, and I work in research. I did research in my US role. I knew the importance of having something peer-reviewed that was published and having some answers to some questions. And it was at that point when I found those articles that I realized, hey, let me ask other mums. You know, the best way for me to find out what's going on with me is to ask if anyone else is going through it. So that's when I did, years ago now, I did a survey questionnaire. I compiled it to just do a kind of study, what they call an exploratory study. It's just to put the feelers out there to see if any kind of further research is warranted or justified. Because it was just me, I couldn't do a research check saying I'm going to ask these moms all of these personal questions, and it just wasn't justified.
Tell me about the response that you got and how that made you feel, and that validate.
Oh yeah, I mean almost straight away. I launched it on SurveyMonkey, and I had it shared on a few international just places on Facebook I was part of, and in the borough that I was in, I had some volunteers who worked for the Association of Breastfeeding Mothers in the UK, which is the biggest for breastfeeding mums, and they share forum. It's just a survey link, and I just had, nearly 500 responses 24 hours, and then nearly 700 responses by 48 hours.
That's amazing.
Yes,
it's like mind-blowing.
Yeah, women had something to say. Yeah, they had something to say. I've done research before, and I've never had that response. Even when we offered incentives, haven't had hundreds of responses. And the responses were long. I mean, it took me months to get through them. There would be like long stories where I'd have to read through, and there would be...
You unlocked something in these moms, and they are now... Yeah. So what did that lead you to?
It led me to write a few research articles to try and publish them, and I've only just recently, a few months ago, had it accepted for publication. So it was really difficult, actually, when you don't have a large body of funding and a lot of names behind your name to get it published. But it's now been accepted for publication, and a lactation consultant who was a friend suggested Gold because the women that can help are lactation consultants and peer supporters, and they would access Gold. And I did it just because I had nothing to lose, and I was surprised that the abstract got accepted. Before Gold, I found it difficult, like I said, to publish. And so I thought, you know what, I don't care about the publication if it's not going to get me anywhere to help women. So I set up a website, and I wrote everything I know on there, and I keep writing everything I know on there and everything I found. And then I set up, because social media is just the way forward. You reach out so easily to thousands of people. I set up an Instagram page just called Breastfeeding Aversion, and I nearly have 5,000 followers on the Twitter. And I just did what I needed to do to push it out there. just in case there were women that needed to know. And it turns out there are women that need to know. That's what I do.
It's amazing. So there's so much to talk about, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to tell us what, if anything, in your research that you've learned that a mother can do to help herself in any way when she discovers that she has breastfeeding aversion.
I'd say the first thing to do would be to join an online support group. It's just a peer-to-peer mother support group. There's a couple on Facebook. They're closed, they're private, and they're safe spaces to vent and share even your most what you may find disturbing thoughts. You can just share them. It's a safe space because you know that you're not alone. The second thing would be to see if there's any correlation between when it happens and if you can identify anything that makes it happen. And that takes some time and that takes some courage, and often it takes someone else to help you as a kind of mirror to see when it happens. And the third thing is some women find supplements helpful. Things like magnesium spray, magnesium supplements, B12 supplements, and that's all anecdotal, but it's not going to harm you to try. So if you join the groups, you can talk about what you need and how you're going to get what you need, and essentially just do something about it straight away, because some women find that it does lessen. Some women find that with support it can change, and it seems to be not individualistic, but there are particular triggers. And there are particular things that happen. So reach out, essentially, normalize it. That way we can get more information about it. That way we can find more answers for why it happens. And I think a big thing for me is that I got support to manage my life and the kids so that the breastfeeding and the breastfeeding aversion wasn't such a massive factor that ruled over my day and night, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So if mothers can reach out and either, get mother's help or a volunteer or members of the family to just take some of the burden off them, because self-care might be a big factor and sleep deprivation might be a big factor in your body's kind of message of giving you aversion.
As a breastfeeding educator, as an IBCLC but a breastfeeding educator, what would you suggest I do during a breastfeeding class as far as this topic? Is it something you feel that I should bring up, and to what degree should I talk about it?
It seems like the majority of women have it with somewhat older children. So I'm just thinking about post 6 months or post 12 months. So it depends if your remit is there. If you're looking at new mums, I don't know the percentage, but say if 1,000 people are contacting me either via messages, or I'd say 5 to 10% of that experience aversion with very young infants. So it depends if you've got the contact with the women who have already established breastfeeding. Saying that, it seems like it can strike at any time. It seems like it doesn't matter what kind of woman you are in terms of ethnicity or age group or demographic or support. It doesn't have any kind of discrimination in that sense. So it might be worth mentioning it just so that women know that it might hit, and that in a way it might be normal. I don't know how to say it. There's one theory that it could be your body's suggestion to wean, especially with older infants, and especially with women that experience it when they're pregnant. So these kind of feelings that seem quite animalistic, that seem quite in the natural world, what an animal might do to push us off. For me, it was a real key factor in my breastfeeding journey, so I would say mention it for sure.
I have to think about this a little bit more, but I think in hearing you talk about it, I will begin talking about it, but I will put it in the same place and give it the same attention that I give not necessarily postpartum blues, postpartum depression, but in the same sense that I might put like postpartum psychosis. In that this is a very real part of some woman's breastfeeding story. And this is approximately when it might happen. And this is what you'll be feeling. To plant those seeds, I also tell parents just to put it on the back burner because you don't want that to rule the early, especially the early days of breastfeeding, worrying about something big that might never happen or that might happen months and months later. But just to plant the seed, because it's like with you. So if something like that was mentioned and the seed was planted, then you were more than likely that at the time that it happened to you, at a certain point in your depths of sleep deprivation or pain or anger, say, oh, I remember that was the thing that was talked about. And then that could set you on a journey of looking and seeking help rather than from, I think what I'm hearing you correctly is many, many, many months of suffering in your own head about something that was greatly disturbing to you and that you felt you didn't feel ready to talk about it even with your husband. So that's a lot of suffering. And I think that if a woman has an idea that that is something that's a possibility, that would help her close the gap between waiting a very long period and suffering and then asking for help. And then, of course, the next thing that we're going to do, because we are coming to a close, so I want to ask you for anything. I'd love for you to know, to tell us what a woman can do as far as reaching out for help. So you said Facebook groups, you have a website. Do you have a couple of places where you could give a specific Facebook group and or your website that moms can go, even if it's just to learn about it, bookmark it and have it there if for some reason it should ever happen to them or they have a friend explaining about it. There's nothing, knowledge is power.
Yeah. I mean, definitely the Instagram, if they're on Instagram, you have women commenting very openly about their feelings, especially and normalize like feelings like being touched out, these kind of phrases, and like having intrusive thoughts. And in a sense, you can go on there because it's public and you can just read what they write. So if you can familiarize yourself with any of that that's happening to you, you'll feel a sense of kind of empathy. You'll feel a burden lifted off you because you realize you're not alone. And there's a lot of guilt that comes with it because part and parcel of the promotion of breastfeeding and it being really lovely and having all this love and all this stuff, unfortunately creates this kind of picture of how it should be. And when you don't have that or when you're not experiencing that in your heart, it can make it very, very upsetting for you, which is completely understandable. So that's an open forum where you don't even have to do anything. You can go and have a look on the page. Otherwise, if you just type in Aversion Sucks, peer-to-peer support, I have a closed group, admins and myself, and welcome to join. And it's mums supporting mums at the end of the day. So
when you say you go and you just punch it in, are you talking about Facebook?
Yeah, the search bar.
So it's just aversion sucks?
That's the hashtag a lot of mums use because a lot of mums that get aversion carry on breastfeeding, I think. So they don't like it, but they want to breastfeed. So it's very interesting. I'm sure if you're to this and you feel the same, you pretty much have aversion in whatever degree you've got it. There's another group as well set up by a lady who did it a few years ago, and it's the same kind of support group, and it's aversion. I think it's nursing aversion support, something like that. So it's the same kind of support, and there's no harm and no shame. And if it will help you carry on with your breastfeeding goals, then just reach out.
What about your website?
So my website is I respond to all messages from my website. I also support women online on my Facebook site and through my website by email, just to try and figure out with them how it strikes, what can help them, because every mother has a slightly different dyad with their infant that's nursing, whether it's the age or what's happened in their journey, and then also they might have their own, like I have disability issues that might have a factor to do with my parenting and what I need help with, and that might play a role in trying to help lessen the aversion, that kind of thing. So they are welcome to look on the site and contact me as well. I'm happy to help. That's all I want to do. I just want to help you get through it. There's a lot of information on that, so and there will always be more information added.
I'm also thinking, like, after I had my first baby, I got interested in birth and breastfeeding, and I became a childbirth educator, then a birth doula, then an IBCLC. And a lot of it was based on my, early birth experience, and everything has flowed from that. And I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, like, it sounds like you're very ensconced in the breastfeeding aversion world and gathering information and helping women. And so I imagine that this is a very big part of your life that's coming from your heart and soul, wanting to really educate other people about this. And you're doing research, and like you said, you're answering questions on your Facebook, on your email. So you've actually created like a kind of a full-time job for yourself in helping women with this issue.
I had to stop my PhD because this was more important. Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much. I think everybody listening to this can appreciate how difficult of a subject this is. And for someone like you to, Zainab, to like literally come on camera and talk about it and share some, pretty deep, intense feelings about the mother-baby relationship, because we know it's all rainbows and butterflies for the most part, and it's very hard to talk about anything that's different. And so you're really you're really like stripping yourself down and exposing yourself to all of us, which is very difficult. And I know that you're doing it because it's, you suffered so much, and it's so incredibly important for you to have that awareness about it. And so I really want to thank you very, very, very much for spending the time with us and talking about it. I really appreciate it.
This discussion is hard stuff, not easy to talk about. And yet, Zainab put herself out there in such a vulnerable way. To put herself out there in such a way that most of us would never, ever want to do publicly. Well, I truly do appreciate her doing so. She feels so strongly about breastfeeding aversion, she spends quite a bit of her free time volunteering to help to educate others. As you heard, she's also involved in doing research. She has a Facebook site and wants you to join and have a safe place so that you can talk about your stuff. Since our interview, I have personally recommended at least 5 moms who are suffering from breastfeeding aversion, and a few that I just wasn't quite sure, but I sent them to the page so they can query a little bit more and learn from it. And I think it's a really great place for not only you to have, but for you to have that little piece of knowledge so that if you ever hear of a mom, another friend talking about this, you just don't think that she's weird or something's wrong. You get to say, hey, I know a place where you can go. Remember another one of my mantras that I'll say from time to time? I want you to share this show. My mantra is, don't let the All About Breastfeeding show be your best kept secret. Share the show and let other moms learn what you are learning. Thanks everyone for being with us today. Until the next show, bye-bye.